Sup nerds, I'm Tom.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Aaron.
Today we're taking a look at Anachrony.
Now it is important to note that we do have the non-Kickstarter version of this game, meaning we don't have the little plastic minis, and actually when playing this we didn't play through any of the variants, the modules and stuff, so this is just the base game that we're going to be talking about here.
If you do want to get the minis, though, they are still available for purchase through Mindclash's website, and it does come with 2 additional modules if this game isn't big enough for you already.
So Mindclash, they took worker placement and expanded it as far as they could go out and filled in every gap and just like came up with as many ways to get points. You're like, you can get points for doing this and that and that. And they made a great game that is just like mind-boggling. You're like, oh, we're time traveling, we're putting these guys here, we can build an engine to put guys here. There's just so much going on, it's insane.
This is definitely the worker placement game that it took me the longest to catch on to, which is surprising because I'd already played a bunch of worker placement games before this, that those were harder for me just because I hadn't played a game. Like when first we played Euphoria, that was probably the biggest worker placement game I'd played at the time. And when we played Guilds of London, I hadn't played a lot of big games. And so those were harder for me just because I'm like, okay, I need to focus my mind into this more Euro-style game. Whereas this one, I played those, I'm like, all right, I'm ready for it, let's do this. And it's still like, if you're going to play this game, I recommend playing it with someone who's already played it, because when it was just me and Tom trying to figure it out for the first time, it was a doozy.
Not to beat you over the head with how complex this game is, but oh my god, how complex is this game? Now, granted, I haven't played many of the famously complex Euro-style games. I haven't played Terra Mystica or Agricola or Caverna, so I don't really have a good frame of reference. And actually, the 2 games that Wes had referred to, Guilds of London and Euphoria, probably were, before playing this, the most complex Euro-style game I've ever played. And again, after playing those, I'd think, I could definitely handle this, and you sit down and it just smacks you in the face.
Like this.
But once you get this game, you do actually get it, because the icons are so clean, all the actions are very clean, they make sense. It's just, there's so much to do. You spend a lot of your time thinking of what you're going to do to get your victory points. And you're like, okay, do I want to build this turn? Do I want to get more people to help me this turn? I don't know what to do, and it's just a lot of analysis paralysis is what this game really comes down to.
Because ultimately, I felt like, towards the end, I was realizing the best way to, maximize your turns in this game is to sort of diversify. You can't just go one specific route. You can't just try, okay, I had built a bit of an engine on my board. You can build buildings, and those are new spots for you to put your workers and only your workers, and I had built a little bit of an engine with water. Well, I can come here to get a bunch of water, I could spend that water to get some points for this, and, that was... While it worked, and I felt proud that I had finally figured out an avenue in this game. I was like, finally, I'm not lost. 10 turns in, and I have some structure. But it was kind of inferior because I wasn't time traveling enough, and Aaron was ranking up a lot of points doing that. Because I never had enough workers. I was always kind of losing out on that. Because you really do need to diversify. You need to try and do... I never did the 2... buildings, the rectangle buildings, because you have to get these things in order to build them, and I never went to that spot. I didn't do it once that whole game. I'm like, ignore that. I don't need more on my mind. Let's focus on this. Water, I can understand that. And that was a big detriment to me. That really held me back.
Yeah, I would say that you have a main goal that so there's 4 different factions you can play as, and each of those has a somewhat unique objective to get before you can evacuate during the apocalypse. So naturally you kind of focus in on that goal and okay, I need to build the water buildings and I need to get the yellow cubes. So everything I do in this game is going to get me water buildings and get me yellow cubes so that I can get out of here and hopefully win the game. But at the same time, that does give you points, but you also need to focus on the other ways to get points. And I think there's a lot of things you can do, and a lot of them help you, and you're like, oh, cool, well, I'm going to go and build these buildings, and they're worth points, that's great. And then, 5 or 6 rounds into the game, you realize, oh man, had I been time traveling, not only do you get the points for time traveling and for building the time machines, but there's also another track that you're moving along that gives you more points every time you time travel. So, yeah, me and Aaron are tied in that we've both built the same amount of buildings, we've done the same things with them, But he has this track where he has 12 additional victory points that I don't have because there is no, like, gain water track.
Taking out those loans from yourself in the future and then going back and repaying them, like doing that time travel, like is very, it's helpful in two ways. Like you're getting stuff earlier in the game. Like, you know, first round I was like, okay, I need an extra worker. So I was like, give me another scientist. And that's a whole round that I have an extra worker. Yes, in the future I need to gain another one to send back, or send that one back that I got in the first place, just kind of send it back. But yeah, I had this extra guy to get me victory points, and then by going back and fixing that anomaly, I get more victory points. It's kind of a no-brainer. Yeah, but if you leave them back there too long, then you get those paradoxes, and they're actually negative victory points. So there is a little bit of risk in that reward.
And that was kind of a trouble I had, especially early on in the game, is I saw time traveling and then borrowing from the future as, oh, that's going to lead to paradoxes and anomalies, and all of that's bad if you can't pay it off. So I just said, that's bad. It's like the illegal tech in Helionox, where I just said, that's bad victory points. You can do it, and it's a buff, but it's ultimately going to hurt you. I just completely didn't pay attention to the fact that when you fix it, you end up with more victory points than are against you if you did mess up a few times.
Mm-hmm. And it's that risk versus reward. It's encouraging you to take a riskier path to kind of, make the game interesting. Because if all we ever did was we just played our own game and built a very efficient engine, it wouldn't be all that fun. But because we're taking the risk and because everybody ready, oh, I'm sending this, you're sending that, oh, I'm sending more than you, so I incur more risk, oh no. Like, that way it kind of engages people a little bit more. Because without that, this game really doesn't have that much player interaction. Even that isn't a lot of player interaction. It is an awful lot of sitting back and doing your own thing. And there is the potential to block people. Like, so you had first player almost every single round because the only way that we could take first player from you was if one of these other tracks were full, like the areas in which we can place workers. Now, we could have gone to the first player spot and taken it from you, but we would have been at a detriment from doing so. So, you would go first, then I would go take the build in action spot, he would take the build in action spot, and now that's full, so you can go take first player again and do the thing. So there is a little bit of player interaction in that area, but because throughout the game we're building up a bunch of spots for us to put our own workers on our own board that don't have anything to do with the other players, then the game kind of devolves into this I'm doing my own thing. You can affect it, but really not that much.
To add on to that, Wes had an ability where he could, for free action, he could place another worker. That was like his special ability. So at the beginning of a round, he'd be like, okay, I'm going to take this free action, do another worker, and I'd be like sitting there like, oh man, he's doing all this stuff. And then at the end of the round, he would pass because he'd be out of things to do, and I'd be like, all right, well, I've built all this stuff on my player board, and I have all these workers, so you passed? Tom, you passed? Okay, it's my turn. It's my turn again. It's my turn again. And that felt kind of really powerful to build that big of a colony that you could just, work with inside of it.
And the other reason that I feel like you end up passing a lot is because the way that the turn order is set up, that you have to do things really far in advance, like prep your exosuits to go to the main board. So you have to think way ahead of, okay, I have this many guys I want to send, so I need to prep that many exosuits, but I'm going to recruit 2 guys during that turn, so I need to prep them extra exosuits, but also I have to get cores to prep those extra exosuits. So there's so much thinking ahead, and not just thinking 3 turns ahead, but thinking out this entire round, because it's not okay, prep an exosuit, next round send a guy, next round prep an exosuit. You prep all the exosuits, you do all of the time traveling, you do all of the worker placement. So it's so easy to get narrow-minded and focused on one thing. And that's, for me, that was the hardest part of this game, is not playing with these blinders on of, this is my mission, this is what I'm doing, and I'm not paying attention to anything else. Because one of them could very easily go to that spot that my entire turn and next turn was dependent on. But 2, you forget about these other tracks, because there's 3 or 4 or 5 different tracks you're trying to pay attention.
6 or 7 or 8.
And there's the bonus victory points that we even forgot to calculate at the end of our last game. And there's the victory points from this and from that, and you can get extra points from doing this. So there's just so many things to pay attention to. It's hard to remember every single one. And in addition to that, planning out your next 5 workers you're going to place.
Mm-hmm. And so by that saying, there's so many things. We were talking about Guilds of London. And you were saying how you felt that one with the symbology was more complex, right?
Yes, absolutely. There's way more symbols in that game than this game. Like, once you've like talked through all these symbols, you're like, okay, well, this makes sense. If I go here, I get this reward. If I go here, I get that reward.
Well, I would agree with you that like the symbols in this game tend to be a little bit more intuitive. Like once you get them, you get them. And in Guilds of London, you have that sheet that everyone's studying constantly to figure out, what all these different symbols mean. However, they're all it's conditional to what's in your hand. You only really have like 7 cards in your hand at a time, at the most, really. So you're only ever looking at these 7 different symbols. Here, while the symbology may make a little bit more sense after you get it, there's so many symbols out there all at the same time. Every single thing is available to you. And that's almost the issue. For some people, maybe that's what they like about it. I mean, that's great. There's so many options. You can do whatever. You're free, open world, open gaming. Go do whatever you want. But for me, it's just too much. It's too much to handle. It's like when you get a roll of bubble tape and you put the whole thing in your mouth, you're like, this is going to be delicious. And then you're just chewing this big wet sock and you're like, this was a bad idea. I'm 27.
So while the simpler minds may be in the corner chewing their bubble gum, for people who like that complexity and just there's so many options and you do whatever you want, this game did it so well. And it definitely, like, once you get it, is just the biggest and the most options, and it's an immersive experience. And I think that it's one of the Euro games that ties in themes so well. Like, I really did feel like when you're powering up your exosuits and you're sending guys in exosuits to this other little place and you're trying to build up your own colony to have the best colony, I felt like I really felt that in this game, whereas in a lot of other Euro games, there wasn't any theme, and it was just like, okay, stick this on there. And like, yeah, Euphoria has a little bit of it, but I felt like the theme in that game came more from like the artwork and the little cool wooden components and not from the actual gameplay. This one, the time traveling especially, was just the way it worked. I'm like a super nerd about time travel, like even more nerdy than the fact that I get together on my after work and film videos about board games. Like, you don't want to talk to me about time travel. It'll be a long conversation and we'll both be annoyed at the end of it.
We're making diagrams out of straws. That's a quote from Looper. It's a great movie.
It's a terrible movie.
Looper.
The time travel in this game, I loved it.
Overall, I do think Anachrony is a good game. Like, it's well designed, it's pretty balanced, it's very ambitious, definitely. I do kind of feel, though, that it was a bit of a swing and a miss for me. Like, I didn't hate it. Definitely not. I did actually start to enjoy it a little bit more towards the end of the game once I felt like, I had gotten it. Like, not only had I, grasped the rules, but I felt like I had, found a strategy, and I feel like, okay, now my plans are going to kind of, give me some fruit. Something's going to happen from what I'm doing here. So I was enjoying it more towards the end, and admittedly, small children, please leave the room, I had a few adult beverages when we sat down to play. And that's definitely not something you can do with this game. And I like games where I can do that, where it's a little bit more complex, I can still get the meat from it, but I can have a beer or two and hang out. And now this game is definitely one that you're going to need a schedule. I do believe that you should play it with the same people if you're going to play it multiple times, so that way if you're constantly introducing a new person to this game, they're always going to have a bad time because you guys are going to trounce them. Like, let's just be honest. And if we're going to be talking about games in the very small amount of time that I have to play very specific games like this, if we're going to be talking about that, I'd much rather schedule a Twilight Imperium or a Game of Thrones, the board game, or even like Islebound. And Twilight Imperium takes a lot more time to play than this does, and Islebound takes a lot less. But I feel like I'd much rather spend time playing those games, or even Euphoria or Guilds of London if I need it to be a Euro-style game. But I keep finding myself wishing that I was playing one of those games in this amount of time than playing this. Now, if Wes was to schedule this and say, hey, Tom, I'm going to play Anachrony on Saturday with Aaron, do you want to join? I would say, okay, sure. But I probably wouldn't initiate that.
So coming into this game, I was told that it's insanely complex and it's just going to blow my mind. So I was like, oh God, I don't know if I want to play this. Like, it seems too much. And I looked at it on the table, it was just like taking up the entire table. Like, there's no room. Like, you have, the entire table's gone. I'm like, oh gosh, this is insane. And they start explaining the rules. I'm like, okay, so it's worker placement, but you got to plan your worker placement before you even take your whole turn. I'm like, okay, I think I can do this. And I usually have analysis paralysis when I play games, but this game, I don't know, I just got so delved into it, and I was like, okay, I'm building my colony, and I'm, taking stuff and then collecting materials and sending it back in time. So I got it in the past. Like, I really enjoyed it. I think the biggest thing was that no matter what you did, you could earn victory points. Like, if you were, just, trying to get a bunch of workers and keeping them well watered, you're just, giving them water every turn and bringing them back, to work for you, that would give you victory points. Or if you're, just building buildings, you're getting victory points. There's a little bit here and there. You could stick with one strategy. You're probably not going to, like Wes said, if you don't diversify, you're not going to have a ton of points.
I said that.
Wes said it too. And the fact that each worker type had like a different ability was something else I enjoyed about it, because, normally in a worker placement game, you're like, okay, so I put this worker here or I put this worker here. It doesn't matter, they're all the same. But now you're like, oh, I only have one scientist. Either I send him to collect extra water, or I send him to try and do research for me so I can build better buildings. So there's lots of, questions you have to ask yourself, and it was just great. I think that they did a good job at putting a lot of moving parts in here, and they all come together great.
So I will agree with Tom where this isn't a game for everyone. There are going to be people that don't like this game, and that's kind of to be said for any big game. Twilight Imperium isn't for everyone. Agricola isn't for everyone. I assume it's not for me. However, this is definitely a game that I fell in love with halfway through my first play. The theme just got me, the mechanics got me. It just, typically these giant worker placement games, I'm like, it's just, there's too much thinking. This game just, it really did hit the nail on the head for me. This is going to kind of be my go-to giant worker placement game. It's definitely a game that I don't mind scheduling. I think that while there are a bunch of the additional modules and variants you can add, that I don't see the need to ever add them because the game is so big, there's so many different strategies. The 4 different factions you can play as have completely different strategies that you're kind of encouraged to take. So you don't ever need to add them. I definitely am wanting to add them in the future. I am definitely going to get the minis for it because they just look incredible. If you've seen, if you go to Board Game Geek and look at the painted versions, they look gorgeous. The setup for this game is super intensive. Maple Realty actually has a gorgeous insert for this game, and hopefully we'll have a review of that soon. But overall, I would definitely give this game a 2 thumbs up.
So these guys definitely like this game a lot more than I did, which happens. We all have different opinions, but since this is basically a 2 versus 1, Neverboard Gaming recommends that you check out Anachrony, and if any of what we were talking about sounds interesting to you, you can go ahead and click the purchase link in the description box down below.
And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe, so you'll never be bored.
Bam! You think Euphoria's complex.
You merely adopted the worker placement.
You see the thing, you didn't try to do the voice, so you didn't look like an idiot.